revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. We don't mind, we got a mind of our own. That's right. We can't go
Welcome
wrong.
to another day in paradise. It's live from the HeartLand show. And thank you, Kev Moe, and good morning, Tom Clark and Katie Hogan.
Good morning.
Hey, how's it going, dude?
Going all right.
All right. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
It's nice to hear Kev Moe again. We've been doing other guys. I missed him. Stand up. Boy, oh boy.
Boy, oh boy.
Is it ever time to stand up?
Yes, it is.
Holy
Stand up.
smokers.
I'm up. I'm
All
down.
right.
So, I love Fiona Hill,
Yes.
as does half the nation. Lynn, you got to move. And God love her for just a stellar flippin' performance.
Well, so much so that number 45 had to take time away from his regular duties running the country to tweet and tweet some more.
Hey, live witness intimidation. Live.
And so the self-impeachment process continues to unfold.
Well, plus he spent 45 minutes ranting on Fox and Friends.
Did any of you watch it?
I
I
saw
couldn't.
parts of
I
it
just couldn't.
on. I saw parts of it on Young Turks overnight. It was it's unlistenable. It's run-on sentences and babble.
I just want to point out that it was disclosed this week that the Secret Service paid Rump Golf Clubs $254,000 just in the first 5 months for lodging and meals.
Yeah, well, there's
His wild and woolly weekends.
so many more millions of dollars they've wasted.
Hey, everybody, I forgot to tell you who our guests are.
Oh, you did?
Salim Muwakkil and Mark Cleveland. Salim is a writer and host on the show on WVON, and Mark is a musician. And we've got Salim with us, so good morning to you, Salim.
Good morning, all.
And
Glad
feel
to be here.
free to jump in on
Oh,
anything
will
we're
do,
talking about.
will do.
That's why we got you.
Okay.
Well, that's why we got you in here for the banter part. I was telling these guys how disheartened I am about once you read the news for more than an hour or so or follow things down. For example, South America is on fire. The people are in the streets, and they're being massacred in Bolivia, in Cochabamba. People were killed by soldiers this week as they marched against the coup, which you, my fellow Americans, helped happen.
We paid for it.
Yeah.
That's right. Getting rid of Ebo.
Yeah.
Also, there's problems in Lebanon and Iraq.
Absolutely.
All over this globe, you find these uprisings. It seems to be this increasing unrest because of the wealth disparities. That's what it seems to be. Everywhere you look, that seems to be at the core.
Remember in '68 we said the world was on fire, and but the wealth disparities at that time were not as marked.
Not as marked, indeed, absolutely.
And
It was a more philosophical discussion than a practical reality of a
That's right.
huge split. There was a middle class.
right,
That's right.
right. There was a middle class.
There were aspirations that many more people shared of actually being able to achieve so-called middle class status.
Yeah.
And there was ideological cohesion in much of this
Speak.
discourse, because right now there's not.
There is not.
Because in Lebanon, for example, they're protesting Hezbollah, which is one of the most revered political organizations in that country, and the Shia are protesting vigorously, and that's very unusual.
And of course, Netanyahu was indicted this week.
We'll see if he steps down.
The elections is another question. But while that's going on, the Israeli forces were knocking down houses in the West Bank, Palestinian houses in the West Bank, some of which supporters were racing to get families out of before the bulldozer got to them. What is up with that country? Why do they keep doing this?
Well, they're also pretty split. And because of the way the media works and all that, and their parliamentary system, we don't hear as much about the opposition that is truly there, and it's why they haven't been able to form a government. I mean, it's almost like Italy all over again, where it's so split up, and there's so little consensus that they can't find a governing majority.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you find now with Netanyahu being indicted, it's so similar to this situation. I mean, these right wing populists, they have this overwhelming popularity among certain members of their nation. They appeal to these nationalist and xenophobic sensibilities, and they become very popular. And so the legal route is the way that a lot of people see of ousting these folks. And so you see that with Netanyahu as well. They can't get him out through democratic means, so maybe he can be ousted through these legal maneuvers.
Well, these ideologues seem to have a remarkable ability to engender anger.
Yes.
And to tap it in a way that it becomes a political force and blocks everything else out. And blocks any attempt to try to see or hear the other side, which we're told we're supposed to be doing all the time. But I feel like I'm hitting a blank wall whenever I attempt to engage.
Well, just to get back into our banter thing, we also were concerned about the environment. The coal ash standards by drinking water are loosened. The EPA, of course, a continued dismantlement or change of mission, shall we say, mission shift to the other side of the EPA.
And what about that algae in Lake Erie?
That's part of it. Lake Erie is threatened, not so much for old reasons, more of the runoff, right?
As we have increased in heavier rains, more soil and fertilizer and manure is washing off the fields into our rivers and into the lake, creating algae, which affects swimming, water quality, and fishing.
And fishing. Whew.
Yep, sorry, fishermen.
It's kind of a triple whammy. Right here in the body of water, it's 20% of our fresh water
Right,
supply.
what's happening on our beachfront?
Well, what's happening in the beachfront is a lot of big rocks and boulders are being installed at Juneway and Rogers and Howard, all of which washed away considerably this summer. And in an effort to both save buildings and what's left of the beach and the walkways, there's major work going on. That probably means no access to those beaches for the winter while this major emergency repair work goes on. And I'll tell you, when that first big nor'easter comes along, residents of the lakeshore are going to have to be bracing themselves. But as we mentioned last week, hats off to Alderman Haddon for getting some quick response from Army Corps and other government agencies to get some emergency work done. Some really good news this week is that federal court jurors in Tucson let a alleged harbor of refugees go free for helping people.
Scott Warren, the felony charges were dropped against him for giving water to thirsty people. I mean,
He's
really.
not the
That
only
was
one
good
charged,
news.
but he was one of the higher profile ones, and he went before a jury of his peers and won.
Yeah, thank God.
Pretty significant
there.
defeat for the federal government on this one. Today, Rogers Park Town Hall meeting with Alderman Maria Haddon, 12 to 2 o'clock at the Rogers Park Public Library.
Let's see, we've got at the P.O. Box Collective, November 25th, Tortas y Talento, 8 to 10:30 p.m. at the Multicultural Open Mic. We also,
We have a 10,000 Villages special sale going on this weekend for Refugee One and other groups. It's a good time to get going on your holiday shopping if you want. All sorts of good values from fairly traded crafts from around the world.
Actually, just don't shop. No, I mean, only shop at
Make
places
stuff.
like this.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't need more stuff.
This Tuesday, Reclaim Chicago, the People's Lobby, and others are asking people to go to City Hall to vote and urge the City Council to vote no on the mayor's budget.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's the people talking about unfulfilled campaign promises, in particular the reopening of mental health centers, which the mayor did not include in her new budget. It's one of several issues that have folks that got pledge cards from her are upset that she hasn't delivered on those promises.
Well, okay.
Maria Haddon's going to discuss later today what her views on the budget are at the town hall meeting.
Yeah, Very good. Should we flip over to our guest now?
I think we could. So have you watched the impeachment hearing, Salim?
Yes, I have watched them. Yes,
Is-
I was drawn into them. I hadn't intended to be so, engrossed in them, but they were engrossing. I mean, they're really historic stuff. And
It is.
I think a lot of times we just kind of take it for granted. And of course, there's that Republican propaganda to try to downplay it and make it boring and
Yeah.
put the idea out there into the public that this is something
Sham.
we would rather not look at.
Yeah, and that it's a hoax.
Yeah, the
a sham.
Republicans actually stopped interrogating the witnesses and or the people making statements and just started doing their
Sprouting,
rants.
right, exactly.
That guy Jacobs from Ohio.
Hey, he's got
Whoa.
somebody running against him. Did you hear that news?
Well, that's good.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's somebody who stepped up to run against him this week.
Oh, okay.
Who actually sounded, I didn't research it further, but sounded like an actual candidate. And boy, oh boy, I could see Cleveland going, get out of here. Get out of here with your shirt sleeved guy. Go back
George,
to the
right.
gym.
And the woman from New York, the representative, what's her name?
Omar,
no, the
no,
Republican woman.
Ocasio-Cortez?
No.
Oh,
the Republican.
The Republican
She-
woman.
she-
I forget her
she's
name.
generated a challenger that seems to be gaining a head of steam now because of her.
She's one of the few Republicans who actually, talked like she has, a thought process.
At one
So-
point, not during the hearings.
Not
though.
during the hearings, that's right.
So in our lifetime, we've had Nixon, which was a more or less bipartisan effort. We've had Clinton, which was decidedly not a bipartisan
Right.
effort. And then we have today. And it's pretty clear, at least based on the polling, after 2 weeks of public hearings, maybe not a single mind has been changed in the American public, maybe, based on the polling. So, is there the same intensity around this impeachment hearings as there were for Nixon, much less Clinton?
Well, no, I think the media atmosphere is different. Nixon didn't have champions who were
That's right.
stating his case so eloquently as Fox News is doing. And
That's funny you use that word in the same sentence with
yeah,
Fox
you're-
News. It's amazing.
but I mean, they keep people off balance, with their continuous effusions of inanity, and people just don't know. They don't know what's true. It's a destabilized situation that we find ourselves in.
So seriously destabilized. We're going to just run around a lot of stuff here because we've got you in the chair. Kim Fox has some challengers,
Yeah.
and she did make her announcement this week that she's running again. And in her announcement, she included and admitting that she didn't handle Jussie Smollett so well,
Jussie Smollett.
thank God for that. But she's really running against the Fraternal Order of Police.
That's what she's running against.
Right.
It reminds me a little bit of what's happening in Baltimore with Marilyn Mosby. Very
Right.
similar. Very
Tell
similar.
us what that is.
Well, the Freddie Gray incident, which catapulted her into stardom, that the police brutality that was evident, and she has come out very strongly and aggressively against that kind of police activity in Baltimore, the kind that required a consent decree, as the kind similar to what happened in Chicago. And she's become very aggressive in this police reform movement, and she's acquired kind of an international reputation for that. And so I think Kim Fox, if she's smart, she will emulate that because she's up against this strong institutional force of the FOP.
Right.
And I think the only way that she can really effectively counter that is to have this movement allure behind her.
There's more of us than there are of them.
Oh yeah. But I mean, they have that. They're mobilizing that money, man. That money is hard to beat.
Yeah, but money doesn't vote. People do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's-
but
Yeah, but
well, you have to work harder to get the people out.
tell me about it.
Money does help you get people to come
And
out.
that's another thing, you know, that the police brutality issue is very emotional, and it can drive crowds if she deploys it correctly.
How might that issue enter into the way the Democratic debates, so-called, are playing out? There was a little bit of tension this week between a couple of candidates around race, and at least in the terms of Mayor Pete, there's some issues about whether or not his police department has been operating on the up and up. So what was your, there's a lot of other stuff around the hearings and everything going on, but there was a debate this week, a forum. I hate calling them debates. What was your takeaway
Well,
from
you know,
the latest?
Pete, Mayor Pete, who's attracting a lot of attention because he's an eloquent candidate, but he has a problem attracting black support. And a lot of people are speculating as to why that is the case. Is it because he's gay? Because there's this assumption that the black community is more homophobic than other communities, and that's keeping the black electorate away from him. And then, of course, there's also that issue in South Bend where he had a problem with the police force. But he seems to have managed that pretty well, because the people in South Bend, the black community in South Bend, speaks well of him and his intentions. They say his intentions were honorable. But there is this issue of race, and how will Mayor Pete deal with that? You know, Biden, the black electorate is radically pragmatic. You know, if they see
Has been for generations.
has been for generations.
That's right.
They want someone who's going to win.
Yes.
And all of the ideological high points and whatnot may attract a lot of attention, but it doesn't pull a lot of black votes. They want someone who can win.
What's your take on Biden in South Carolina and the black vote?
Yeah, I think Biden's got
Two-thirds
that.
of the Democratic vote is from the black community.
I think that's why Biden is so strong there. He's dipping a little bit, though. I mean, people are becoming a little bit less sure of his position, but he still has, you know, because of his Obama connection.
Yeah.
You know, that's primarily the reason.
And his history.
His history.
Yeah, his
he-
history as a good old liberal.
civil rights guy.
Exactly.
But in South Carolina, the report I heard on NPR was there was a split between older black voters who supported him and the younger black voters who have not necessarily come out as strongly for Biden.
That's true. There is some
That
of that.
split has to be across the country by this time.
It is. It is.
The myth of the monolithic black vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But it's still, though, I mean, black women still control it, and they still are
Right on, sisters.
solidly behind Biden at this point.
Would you guess that will be still the case in March here in Illinois?
You know,
Hard pressed.
I'm hard pressed.
Selly, it's not a year off. It's 4 months off.
I
That's
know.
right.
And the petitions are already being passed. And there's been scrambling this week for new petitions with certain resignations and changes in office. So it's a crazy time that all comes to a head. December
the
3rd,
holidays.
Over the holidays?
Right.
All the decisions about who gets on the ballot in March are being made right now. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
What do you, just staying on local elections for a second, how about the fair tax legislation that we're going to face in November? What do you think? What do you predict? Are people talking about it to you on your show?
I don't hear much about it.
No.
I don't hear much about it.
Well, maybe you should talk about it on your show.
Perhaps that would be a good answer.
Speaking of your show, tell us about your show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a show from 7 to 10 on Saturday nights on WVON. Been on for a while, a few, 12 years now.
We got you beat here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
But you've been on there 12 years, and this is the first time we've had you on the show.
Not at
No,
all.
but talking about it.
Oh, right,
Not
right,
at
right.
all. We've talked about it before when we've had him on.
We'll see the proof of it.
Yeah, well, I used to be on more nights a week. I
That's right.
kind of cut it down a little bit, and but it's a popular show. I get a lot of response, and I love it. I love the ability to keep my finger on the pulse of the community, find out what's on the community's mind, and they people feel pretty confident in opening up to me. So
Yeah, they do.
So what's the hot topic the last week or two on your show?
ADOS?
So tell our listeners what ADOS is.
American Descendants of Slavery. It's a group that really they've emerged in the last 2 years or so, really in the last year. Their specific focus is reparations, because as reparations has gained in mainstream visibility, so has the ADOS movement. In fact, they claim paternity for this new visibility of the concept of reparations. I don't think they deserve that, but I think they're a part of it. I think they're a part of it. But what it is that they're trying to be more specific. They're trying to bring a specific orientation to the plight of African Americans. Their point is that it's not simply race, it's not simply skin color, but it's accrued disadvantages from the legacy of slavery. It's a socialization process that happened in plantation America when Africans were kidnapped and brought here. That socialization process created a new ethnic group, essentially. It was ethnogenetic. It was ethnogenesis. And African Americans is what we used to, that term, which at one point seemed to be a pretty good description, because it kind of hyphenated the hybridity, African American,
And certainly was better than what had been being used.
Negro, and those other words, those other epithets. But ADOS is trying to be more specific, even, and it's trying to draw a line between immigrant African groups or diasporan African groups and those who were socialized by American slavery, which they contend is a completely different phenomenon and has created different people. And that one of the things that we need to be is more specific in our orientation.
So what are reparations?
Reparations are, it's a variety of strategies, basically compensatory resources for a debt owed that has resulted in this compounded poverty that you see in the African American communities, wherever you look. Accrued disadvantages that were begun during the period when we were absolutely prevented from obtaining any resources, not just financial resources, but cultural resources as well. There's a lack of cultural capital that's a part of the socialization process. Like black people were socialized for subservience for centuries in this country.
Yeah.
And so the point of the ADOS group is to try to be more specific in trying to redress those socialized problems that we have.
We're coming up on 50 years since the Fred Hampton murder assassination. And it was interesting yesterday to see all the people who were remembering, because it was November 22nd, the assassination of Kennedy, and where you were. And I know I was in an 8th grade classroom, and my nun could not really successfully hide her tears when she came back in to have us all stand and say a prayer for the president. And it was kind of, to me, a moment of our loss of innocence, and as a nation. I don't know if no one's nodding their heads or anything. So.
No, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember the day it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But you were talking about Fred Hampton, though,
I know,
and that's coming up
because-
on December 4th. Will be 50 years since he was assassinated, first drugged and asleep, and then assassinated on the West Side by Hanrahan and the COINTELPRO police, FBI, etc.
Mm-hmm. Where were you for the Fred Hampton murder?
I was in New Jersey. I was in the Panther Party myself at that time.
Yeah.
And Fred Hampton was a well-known kind of hero for Black Panthers all around the country because of his attempt to basically what he was known for in our circle was enlisting street gangs.
Yeah.
From bringing the energy of the street organizations into the movement.
Didn't he piggyback on the Black Pea Stone Nation action in that way? Because
He did.
Because when I was in high school and we were activists, we had gang members come to our high school, which caused, that's a whole nother story, but to talk about flipping their agenda into community organizing.
Exactly. And Fred was the one who really pioneered that.
Yeah, was he?
Yeah.
So that was, I'm talking 67.
60, right.
Is when
66, 67, 68.
So, yeah, I don't, I'm not sure that the current generation knows anything about what you're talking about
Yeah,
today,
I know.
from ADOS on through.
But this ADOS dispute, because they're controversial,
I'm sure.
and one of there are echoes in what's happening with them and the Black Panther Party. When the
Yes.
Black Panther Party came along, they were condemned by a lot of black groups that were already
Sure.
extant.
Sure.
And so they had to come out strong as well.
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther Party, I know we were told at one point to curse at these black, the nationalists, what we used to call the pork chop cultural nationalists. We were told to actually be vociferous in our language toward them. And similar that's what's
You mean
going
to
on.
deepen the division?
Well, to show that we're not punks.
What-
You can't just-
Because you had a real split. You had, the progressive black community, and
right.
and then you had Ron Karenga and
Precisely.
and those guys who were
Precisely.
the cultural nationalists, and
We used to call them pork chop nationalists, and they would call us integrationists, proxies. Essentially, all we wanted was integration. That's what they would say.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. We're talking this morning with Salim Muwakkil, who otherwise has a program Saturday nights on WVON. I want to
And
talk.
also a great writer, may I say, an editor at In These Times, which I am so glad still exists.
Woo.
Right on In
And
These
it's
Times.
doing better than ever.
Yeah, I think
as
so.
a matter of fact.
Apparently.
Yeah.
socialism is in.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Is there more traction around reparations, and if so, why? Is it Black Lives Matter, or the writings of your colleague Ta-Nehisi Coates, or is it the 1619 series in the New York Times? Why is it that reparations seems to be, at least on the edge, a little bit more of our political
I think it was
discussion?
Ta-Nehisi, quite frankly. I think he inserted it into the national discourse in a very intellectual way. It's difficult to contest his arguments.
Did he write The Debt?
Huh?
Who wrote The
No,
Debt?
Randall Robinson.
Ah,
wrote The
right,
Debt,
that's
which
what I
was argued for reparations as
Right.
well. But Ta-Nehisi did it. He argued for reparations, not even including slavery.
Right.
He was talking about redlining and the kind of housing discrimination, and he made an eloquent case without even including slavery. And I
He
think
really did.
I
Really
think his
good
argument
point.
was so cogent
Yep.
that it really changed the game in reparations. And then ADOS kind of moved in on that. There's been groups for a while in Cobra and other black nationalists, but it traditionally has been kind of a cultish black nationalist preoccupation.
Yeah.
And now it's much larger.
In your awareness of the press situation and people getting news, can I move to this, Tom? Because there's so much. I mean, we didn't even talk about the consent decree when we were talking about Chicago police, or Kim Fox, but I feel like that is the most historical thing going on in our city in terms of making change for black citizens in our city, the consent decree. But we'll go on from that to how people get their news, how people find things out. The New York Times had a piece that I have somewhere on this table that says how the collapse of local news is causing a national crisis. You know about that? And
I didn't read the piece, but I saw the headline.
Yeah.
And I agree with. I mean, it's obvious. It's how what kind of profit model is there?
well, yeah, and the reader's going nonprofit. What do we have to do to get our word out, especially in the face of so many people getting their news from Facebook, and sooner or later we're going to have to boycott Facebook,
Yeah.
whose head sat down with Trump this week after he testified before a congressional committee on various sins. Where's the question there? I don't know.
Well, there is this movement in the shifting media landscape to look at the nonprofit business model. It's interesting putting the words nonprofit and business in the same sentence, but nonprofit's just a tax status. How you run your business is something else altogether. And I applaud Tracy Bain not only for trying to keep the reader alive by taking it nonprofit, but she spearheaded a major effort announced this week where funders are up in the ante in supporting nonprofit news enterprises of all different shapes and stripes.
Yeah,
MacArthur Foundation, Chicago Community Trust, and others.
And you're pretty intricately involved in all of that stuff as well, Tom, aren't you?
Well, we may have been a little ahead of the current discussion, perhaps.
He retired from community media
But
workshop.
it is great to see the additional attention right now and the look at other ownership models than how many ads can we sell to get so many pages printed, because that was the old model and that's not working anymore. There was another study out this week that said that what consumers are looking for is crime, politics, sports, special projects, and real estate. I want to get to the special projects part, because that is data-driven journalism research often, and we've had several examples of that this week, including the isolation room story that came out this week that got a very quick response from the governor. It showed the role, all in 1 week, of the importance of investigative journalism and figuring out some way to keep citizens informed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that is an excellent example of why there's this extreme need for that kind of serious investigative journalism that is not beholden to advertisers, and we're absolutely losing that, man. Absolutely losing it. So.
Do you have any advice for the Tracy Bames or others having labored it in these times, a nonprofit business model for some time?
I don't even know why. The only reason I can say, and I maybe I shouldn't even say this, but
Come on.
Trump is what boosted in these times. Trump's emergence, and that's not a I would rather not hope for that kind of
Required
incentive.
incentive, right.
Well, from the get-go, Trump has, created more people in the streets. I mean, the Women's
Right.
March right after he was elected. And, everywhere, the amount of activism is pretty intense. And for those of us who were out there always trying to recruit people to get involved,
did it.
now we can say, keep it up, you young people, keep getting them involved.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's stuff for everyone to do, and this voting is going to be really crucial all over the country. What's your sense around the country of seats that Democrats should focus on? Maybe some long shots? Any governor's races? Mitch McConnell running for the Senate in Kentucky. I just wonder if we have any shots at some of these.
I haven't been as assiduously attentive to these races as I usually am. Really, I usually do pay a lot of attention, but I haven't been that much interested. I mean, the Trumpian explosion is just such an amazing phenomenon.
Yeah.
To see the way the Republicans just
Have
get in
folded
line,
over.
man. It's amazing. It's something I would have
Yeah,
never
Lindsey
even
Graham.
Did you see him running away from a veteran in the hallway yesterday?
I didn't see that one. I
That
did
was
see him.
a nice little piece of journalism.
To help our listeners get off to a good weekend in these crazy times, what do you do to relax? What music are you falling back on these days, or other entertainments?
Jazz is always a comfort to me. If it were not for this wide repertoire of jazz recordings and music in general, music is very helpful. I do a lot of fishing also, although.
How's your fishing in the era of raised lake levels? What do you
very,
find?
very difficult. And in fact,
I should
one of the places that I used to go
Right.
is flooded. So
The Jackson Park Lagoon?
Yeah, right in
Yeah.
that area. I can't go over there any longer. So, that's under some extreme renovation now because of the Obama Center.
Another whole issue we didn't get to.
Woo!
We'll have to
Yeah.
have you back very soon
Well,
to
let's
talk about
say
what's
a
going
word.
on with
Say
that.
a word about the Obama Center. Since you live in the neighborhood.
It's a very divisive issue.
Yeah.
Very divisive issue. I mean, I've seen people come to blows, literally come to blows
Wow.
over the issue. So the question it touches so many things. The whole idea of regentrification, the community, the whether there's going to be any kind of agreement on that, and the fact that people are proud of this black man who was a president and came from Chicago. What other opportunity will we have to parlay that into some sort of resource bonanza?
Yeah.
And that's what this represents.
Right.
So why threaten that?
Right.
Salim, you look in good shape, as you always do. I'm wondering what you do as a personal regimen in terms of food and workout, and if you follow any sports.
I do a lot of stationary biking and rudimentary weight training. I've had some recently. I've had some health challenges, so I've had to cut down a little bit on that. But that's a function of age. But I'm taking care of that.
Good.
I'm taking care of that.
You look good,
Thank you.
as always.
Thank you.
I guess we're going to have to go to our second guest.
Once again, what night is your show on? Saturday nights,
It'll be on
WVON,
tonight
7 to 10.
from 7 to 10, 1690. Or you can check out my Facebook page also. I tend to do a live broadcast.
That's right. That's how I catch you. And if we boycott Facebook, how do we do live streams?
Yeah, that's Facebook.
I'm not boycotting Facebook.
Facebook is becoming so indispensable, man, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, families keep in touch on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that stock was way up yesterday, Facebook stock.
Salim Muwakkil, thank you so much for joining us
You're
on a
quite
Saturday
welcome.
morning. We
Quite
really
welcome.
appreciate your
I appreciate seeing you
filling
guys
us in,
again.
and we have to have you back sooner.
Yes, sir.
So
Thank
much
you.
more we could have covered. You're listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. Now a little bit from Mark Cleveland.
Even if the rain snow might kill me, it's in my blood. To get up and walk, even if the rain snow might kill me, it's in my blood. To get up and walk, even if the rain snow might kill me, it's in my blood. To get up and walk, even if the rain snow might kill me, it's in my blood to get up and walk. Well, an old man sitting by the side of the road, full moon was burning bright. He told me of an old way, another path to take if I just get up and walk. If I just get up and walk. His eyes are screaming starlight, his hair is streaming white. He flew in from the north wind, his form was made of light. He said, get up and walk. He said, get up and walk. And then he said, even if the rain so might kill me, it's in my blood. Get up and walk, even if the rain so might kill me, it's in my blood. Get up and walk, even if the rain so might kill me, it's in my blood. To get up and walk, even if the rain so might kill me, it's in my blood to get up and walk.
A little bit of Get Up and Walk, song by our next guest. We welcome to the microphone Mark Cleveland, musician and other hats that you wear. Thank you so much for
Welcome
joining
back,
us.
Mark.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So tell us about that particular song that kicks off most of your gigs.
So in early 2000s, I was adopted by a Native American elder, and he helped me understand that part of my heritage. I traveled around the West with him to places that are not in your history books, written by Eastern Europeans, and helped me understand what path that I was on. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of my experience has been having the courage to live up to the things that I've been asked to do. Tatanka Scar, White Buffalo, was an elder who adopted many of us and helped us find find this path. And in Native American tradition, which I've tried to honor everywhere I performed, you honor your elders first, then you honor your warriors. And by warriors, I mean, our veterans, but also people who put their life in harm's way. My daughter is an EMT. She's one of those. So,
would you include water protectors in that?
I would, actually. And
Thank you.
Right on.
Very much
Appreciate
will.
that. Appreciate that. I mean, the water protectors that we had on this show, who were trying to keep this from happening, are now crying over a football field full of oil off that Standing Rock.
Yes. Well, that was
Pipeline.
always going to happen.
Exactly.
That was always going to happen. We knew that was going to happen. That's why they were protesting.
Exactly.
So,
How did this trek change your approach to the music you do?
well, for me, it allowed me to really understand the lessons that I was given. Many of our experiences happen to us, and years later, the purpose of that experience or the meaning and the influence in your life becomes known to you through other events or things that transpire. So by turning these experiences into songs and sharing them with others, I did two things. It allowed me to share my experiences with the world, and I love all the emails and texts I get from people who say, "Oh, I was traveling here and I heard this song and it meant this to me," and so it's bigger than me now, and it's a blessing. I say that as humbly as I can.
Totally.
But, and it also allowed me to really reflect on those lessons and keep them with me, like my prayers almost. These are all sacred things to me. So.
I love that you've got these beautiful flutes and sitting in front of us.
Yes, I do.
We had our last Native American guest similarly laid out on our table pipe, feathers, a bunch of others. He's not a musician, and it's just interesting that happened again here. What would listeners find on your Songs from the Journey CD?
They would find that song and then a series of songs that shared the questions that I was asking myself about why am I here, what is my purpose, what does Creator intend for me? Because at that time I was just trying to understand what I was supposed to do. And,
Sure.
And I stopped.
Aren't we all?
I stopped trying to inform that and just listen for it in the world that I was traveling in and the people that I engaged.
Where's home to you? Right here?
I grew up out east. I grew up on the ocean, so water is a very important thing to me. But grew up as a surfer and all that. But moved out here to the Midwest and had the opportunity to get to be part of the Chicago area for now 30 years.
You brought these instruments. Can you share some live music with us?
I'd be happy to.
What were you going to say, Michael?
Well, before you play, there's a book out called They're There by a young Native writer named Tony Orange. And in that book, he really talks about the early first Thanksgiving, which, in his opening, which clearly was not just a coming together of joyous people as the new European invaders came on the scene. But there was poisoning the native people. It's just a heavy indictment of the myth around Thanksgiving. And I wondered what your take is on Thanksgiving, which comes up before our next show. It's next Thursday. And how people might want to think about that holiday these days.
Well, it coincides with Native American Heritage Month, although I understand our government recently did something to try to overshadow that and downplay Native American heritage. But this is an important time of year for all of us as we start to approach the winter. Winter is the storytelling time where we can share those sacred things that are not typically shared in other seasons. And Thanksgiving is something that we should be doing on a regular basis. The thing that I always reflect on and what I've grown to really appreciate is the Native American culture is resilient. It has survived.
Boy, I'll say.
Over and over, things that have happened, and still is a valid part of our American culture. And we stand to be recognized as for our contribution and for the work that people continue to do to try and make good decisions and help guide our country, as many of us are trying to do now beyond Native American culture. So this is a double barrel flute. You can't see it in the microphone, but
We'll see it on our video.
this was made for me by the brother of the elder that adopted me, and it is a traditional flute. When I traveled with him, one of the places I traveled to was a place you would know as Wounded Knee, and I'm not going to tell that story over time, but and it's, to be respectful, but this song came to me while we stood on top of the monument that's over a hill overlooking that space, and you can feel, how when you've been to places and you can feel the emotion that's still in the land there, and so this is a song that came to me there, so.
Pretty nice.
Wow. The
Tell us
double-barreled flute.
Tell us again that was from inspiration from Wounded Knee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had to find a way to express the emotion that I felt when I was standing there.
That's Pahasapa?
Yeah. Well, that's a reference to the Black Hills, which is a sacred area in much broader context, but.
Right. We have a list of some career highlights of yours. You were part of opening Millennium Park?
I was actually probably.
Did our friend Helen Doria put you up to that?
No, I got a call from a guy named, as a Rhythm Revolution drummer, guy, John Yost, who
sure.
is a very eclectic
Yes.
musician, called me, a sitar player, and a half a dozen other people. I think we had Andy Mitran on piano, and we were just all told to show up in the morning at about 6 while the news was getting ready to open, and we had 300 people doing Tai Chi while we played. And we hadn't even
wonderful.
met each other. And what a beautiful way to open that space.
Indeed. And also something here is listed that the repatriation of Maori remains in New Zealand.
Yes, the Maori asked a good friend of mine, Joe Podlasek, to be their spokesman here in Chicago while they repatriated the remains of their ancestors from the Field Museum. And the Field Museum cooperated with that repatriation. And Joe was the intermediary on their behalf. They sent a group over here, collected the remains, welcomed them back spiritually, and then we were invited to travel back to New Zealand. And one of the most beautiful things that I love doing this program because it made me think of all these things. They took me downstairs in their archives and allowed me to play these flutes that were thousands of years old.
Oh, gosh.
And so it just was a beautiful experience, not only, and then traveling to each Maori community. So I'd say kia ora to our good friends.
So while we've got you, we should also mention that you have a standing gig at the Celtic Knot.
I do.
Every third Saturday?
I do.
What's their new location?
626 Church. in Evanston.
626 Church, right.
So do you mix up native music with Irish music?
Well,
Irish music is native music.
Yeah, the thing that I've learned as I've traveled around the world playing music is that, all of us aspire for a lot of the same things,
We're
and
connected.
the energy in a lot of these different, indigenous cultures is to share, really express the same kinds of things.
Well,
So-
speaking of native music, one of our friends who's been on the show is Jim Denomi, who does a Sunday morning show on WLUW called Voices from the Circle. And I wondered, in your travels and knowing Jim, give me a little hint of the state of Native American music. I mean, there's a lot of young people as they're doing rock and roll, native punk. What do we got going on out there in the world?
Well, I think that there are outstanding native performers in every genre. Okay, I've had the good fortune to travel with a gentleman named Bill Miller, who I first heard on a CD player boombox while we were building a lodge up north, and eventually had the opportunity to play with him. But there are fellows like Wade Fernandez, who's a multi-NAMI award winner, who's traveling around Europe sharing his music. There are people in all types of music. So I think it's a vibrant way to express culture.
Mark, could you tell us about the Trickster Gallery and the non-musical parts of your art life?
Good, yes.
So I've been very fortunate to be part of an organization who aspires to be an authentic voice for Native American culture through the arts, through education, through Veterans Affairs. Native Americans are the largest racial, by race, advocate of volunteerism in our services because they're defending our land. And we've done some great things to recognize Native American veterans as a unique group of veterans and respect all veterans through that effort. So we've done, Joe and the organization there, Joe Pedlosic, have done some great work to have the Eagle staff recognized as our country's first flag here in Illinois, and that's been proposed nationally.
Hey, Raja did.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
he
love
did.
Raja. Krishnamurti.
Brings to mind Peter Lafarge's song about Ira Hayes, after the Second World War. One of the guys who put up the flag at Iwo Jima.
Yep, I was just, and if you watched that thing on country music recently, you got a little deeper insight into that song, right?
When you talk about the fact that we are in our roots connected as people, that resonates. It touches a deep place in all of us, and those of us who have been paying attention, I guess I call it. And so in that stream, you also mentioned volunteer opportunities. There's a Veterans Holiday Dinner that people can help with.
Yeah, it's coming up at the Trickster Gallery in Schaumburg. You can go www.trickster, and you will find a lot of information. We're doing that. We have a exhibit on Native American women veterans and domestic violence at the Thompson Center, which is really compelling.
Stunning.
There's a very large percentage of Native American women who have experienced domestic violence, and there's a whole issue around women missing on reservations that we want to do more work around. There are a lot of education programs taking place to help people understand how to respect the Native American culture appropriately. Most people approach Native American culture wanting to do something the right way, but this
Don't always know how.
Well, we just try and help them, find
That's
the right
great.
path. So
The Standing Rock standoff, as it were, and actions of 2 years ago, we covered it pretty extensively. We're actually going to get a report in a couple weeks from somebody who is lawyering for them. Did you find that was a unifying moment for the various peoples that we're referring to right now?
yeah, and I think it's important to understand that that's just one of many things that Native American people are trying to bring attention to.
Yeah.
And this became a unifying moment for people to gather, and it was a beautiful experience that way. I did not have the opportunity to go, but my wife and I did basically underwrite the medical tent that was put up there, and I think now has probably been bulldozed over, but we all supported that. The Trickster organization had a shuttle out with supplies every 2 weeks and things. So it was a great opportunity for people of all cultures really to come together and try and recognize the decisions that are being made every day to impact our environment.
Yeah. We should have you sing. I think since you've got that guitar.
I have a good song to do that picks
So
up
my
on
mom
it.
used to say it, guitar. Play your guitar.
Out here on the stars, my ancestors are beaming, covering our way home. If the end was near, why am I still dreaming? Unmask the night alone. Where do we go from here? We'll find out now. Where do we go from here? We'll find out now. From dust to empty clay, a river, so they say. Wipe the dust away. If anyone holds a lamp, please light up this thing and let's show it to the world. Where do we go from here? We'll find out now. Where do we go from here? We'll find out now. Not one more step will I or others take until these lines are crossed, and I will hold your words and treasure them with mine. Long as I am breathing. Where do we go from here? We'll find out now. Where do we go from here? Find out now.
Nice.
Whoa. That's beautiful. That's strong. That is strong.
Thank you.
So, Mark, you're at Celtic Knock tonight,
Tonight, yes.
and where people can hear a whole different array of music.
Yeah, I have the good fortune of being surrounded by really talented musicians who bring a lot to the party. I've traveled with them for most of my music career, and so we'll be there.
Mark Cleveland, it's so great to have you back on the show. We'll do this again, I know, and maybe I'll make it out to that Schaumburg address.
That's right.
You're out there way in the hinterlands. We want to thank Lynn Orman for getting you here today, James Porter for keeping the mics on, Coco, our student intern, who's with us for a couple more weeks. Next week we got Tom Tresser from Civic Lab and Lori Shelley, jazz pop singer. We are remembering Fred Hampton. We are remembering JFK. And next up, stay tuned for Emmy-nominated Bob Maravich doing Gospel Memories.
Keep good in the world.
The world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people. Over now.